Hey everybody, hope you are doing well. We are doing Romans 12 today. Thank you for joining me. If you haven't been here before, you can go back in the feed and find Romans 1 through 11. And today we are doing Romans 12. If you have any questions or comments, please leave those in the comment section below. I appreciate those, and we'll definitely consider the questions and try to answer them as best I can. And look forward to interaction there. Also, if you could share this out with your friends list, I'd appreciate it. We can increase the reach of these and help others hear what God's kind of put on my heart through this study. Hope you're enjoying it. So we'll jump right into Romans 12. There's a lot in this one, so it may end up being a longer video. I'll try to keep it as short as I can, but there's a lot of good stuff here. So we'll start going through it. 12:1. So yesterday we were kind of talking about the Jews and their place, and Christ, God trying to win them back. And today it seems to, in Romans 12, it seems to completely change gears, I guess. We don't see any mention of that, so there's not a whole lot here tying back to what we were talking about before, except that Paul is still writing this letter to the Roman church and kind of giving them direction and trying to build them up and lead them. And so that's what we're talking about here. Excuse me. So Romans 12:1 talks about presenting your body as a living sacrifice and how that's your spiritual worship, or some translations say your reasonable sacrifice. So basically, my understanding of this is that they were used to this idea of sacrifices and how you would take an animal and you would kill it, and that would be your payment for sin, or your reparations for sin. And so this is basically saying make your body a living sacrifice and give that over to God. Obviously, you wouldn't want to kill yourself to do this, but that as a living sacrifice, you're denying your own will, denying your own intentions, and giving that to God for His use. And we saw this at least one time in the Old Testament, where the lady took her son to the temple to dedicate him to God's service. I believe that was Samuel. I could be wrong on that one. But anyway, so they weren't completely foreign to this idea. But what always has gotten me with this verse is that last part where it says this is your reasonable service, or this is your spiritual worship. This is kind of something you should do. It's not something that's just completely foreign or unheard of. And as a part of that, it talks about not being conformed to this world, but being transformed by the renewing of your mind, and not going along with what the world's doing, but being different as Christians and as followers of Christ. And that by testing, we can discern the will of God and what's good and acceptable for Him. Verse 3 offers a warning. Sorry. Verse 3 offers a warning against pride and thinking too highly of yourself, but think with sober judgment. I think that it's kind of funny, when we start thinking too highly of ourselves, it's kind of like we're drunk on our own, what we think is our own, goodness or our own pride, but each according to the measure of faith that God has assigned. 4 through 8 talk about how we're all many parts of one body. We're all part of God's. We're all part of God's kingdom, and we each have different parts. And it goes through some of those in prophecy and service and teaching and exhortation or encouragement and leading, and it goes through several of those. But what I kind of got out of this today, and I've been through several spiritual gift studies, and this isn't meant to be one of those. If you don't know what your spiritual gift is, or you don't know what God is using, or what God has created you to do, in His kingdom, there are resources out there. I would encourage you to go seek those out and find a spiritual gift study, or even a test, or there's a better word for it, where you can kind of answer some questions and figure out whether you're more of a serving type person, whether you're more of a teaching type person. But what kind of jumped out at me about that today was that if we're all part of one body, and one of us decides not to contribute, how is not only are we suffering, but the body is suffering. So if you wake up one morning and your arm decides just to not work for some reason, that not only is that arm probably going to hurt and it's going to start to atrophy and whatnot, but the whole body's going to suffer because of that. So as a Christian, we're supposed to be serving. We're supposed to be doing as this sacrifice, as our living sacrifice to God. Part of that is serving and doing what God's called us to do. And if we're not doing that, not only are we hurting ourselves, but we're also hurting the body of believers that we're around and we're in association with. 9 and 10 talks about being genuine, abhorring evil, holding fast to what is good, and loving each other, loving one another with brotherly affection, and outdoing one another and showing honor. So basically trying to outserve your brothers and sisters in Christ. And I think just in general, I think God's called us to be servants. And if we think too highly of ourselves, and I mean, Jesus even demonstrated this in washing the disciples' feet. He said, no one's above doing anything for the kingdom. No one's above doing anything for someone else. And so it's our job as Christians to serve one another and to even outdo each other in serving and showing honor. Verse 11 talks about serving with zeal. A lot of times we'll see, you have some kind of service day at the church or something, and there's always that one person that shows up but doesn't want to be there. And this really encourages us to not only serve, but to do it, with purpose and with excitement and with zeal. Verse 14 talks about blessing those who persecute you. It's easy, and it's kind of in our human nature to try to get back at people. And there's a couple of warnings through the end of this chapter that talk about blessing those and being a blessing to those that try to hurt you and that curse you. And as Christians, we're supposed to work under a different mind frame and work under a different calling, just like we talked about earlier. We're not conforming to this world; we're being transformed. And so we shouldn't return evil for evil, or we shouldn't, try to get back at people. We should instead love them, and we'll talk about that some more later. Verse 15 talks about having empathy for people, rejoicing with those who rejoice, weeping with those who weep. Basically put yourself in their situation so that you can kind of feel what they're feeling, and that way you can minister with them best. Your ministry or your words aren't going to be genuine and aren't going to be helpful if you're not trying to put yourself in their situation. And I think a lot of times our reaction to people would be very different if we took the time to think about where they are. It's really common these days for people to have some kind of backlash on the internet based on something that was posted or video or whatever, and there's just this huge cyber uproar. And if you read through the comments, you can really get depressed at where our society is going. But really, what that boils down to is people aren't empathetic to what the person that had the reaction are going through. Whether it's the kid pitching a fit in a store, or whether it's some interaction with the police, or some news story or whatever. If you put yourself in that situation, you would look at it differently. And I think that's the case a lot of times, and it's challenging us as Christians to put ourselves in those situations so that we can empathize with people and we can really get with them where they are, so that we can try to help them out. Verse 16 talks about living in harmony, and again it ties back to pride, and how that pride will break up that harmony. And if you think too highly of yourself, that you don't associate with the lowly, you're going to create a disharmony. Verse 17 again talks about not repaying evil for evil, but giving thought to what is honorable in the sight of God. So again, we're holding ourselves to a higher standard. And I've talked about this with my men's group and out of Ephesians 5. But God's called us to a higher standard, that we're not, again, we're not conformed to this world. We're different. We're transformed. And it talks about living peaceably. 19 talks about never avenging. Never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God. That's kind of the biblical version of karma, at least my understanding of karma. I've not done any study on that. But basically it's not your job to avenge the wrongs that are done to you. That's God's job to repay justice for sin. That's his job. It's not ours. And if we take it on ourselves, it's going to create more issues for us. And then 20 talks about not only are you not avenging for evil, but if your enemy, if those that are trying to do wrong to you are hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him something to drink. And by loving on him this way, he's gonna, it's gonna be, it says heaping burning coals on his head. That's gonna get back at him. That's probably going to annoy him more than anything that you could do in like kind. But again, that's not the point. It's not that we're trying to get back at them. It's just that, God's called us to love people no matter what. And no matter what they do to us, and no matter the evil that's paid to us, that our job is to take care of people and to love on people, and to build people up. And it says, do not overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good, in 21. And so it's our job to outlove people, and not to try to get them back. And again, the point is not vengeance. The point is not to get people back, but to simply love people. And that's our highest calling. We know from the Gospels that when Jesus was asked what the greatest commandment was, he gave 2 commandments, and they were love God with everything you've got, no matter what, and love your neighbor as yourself. And so every commandment that I've seen kind of fits within those 2, either loving God or loving your neighbor. And so if we can do those 2 things, then we know we've got it covered. But anyway, that's all I've got for today. Again, please share this out if you found any value in it. Maybe your friends list would as well. Comments or questions in the comment section, I'd appreciate it. And I will see you tomorrow with Romans 13. Thank you.